Imagine trying to pack an entire primeval forest with all its, towering canopy trees and creeping undergrowth and those massive biological networks
Right.
into an area roughly the size of like 3 parking spaces.
It sounds completely
It
impossible.
really does. I mean, on paper, you would totally assume a project requiring that level of ecological engineering would be, I don't know, spearheaded by tenured
Or
professors.
some heavily funded research institute.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But today, the guys leading us through the source material for this deep dive are 2 researchers named Kesser and Steen.
Yes.
And the most fascinating part of their methodology is that they are exactly 11 years old.
Which is just wild. I mean, it completely shifts the lens of our analysis here.
Oh, absolutely.
When you look at the research Kesser and Steen have compiled, they aren't just documenting the physical steps of how to build one of these ultra-dense environments.
Right, the Miyawaki Forests.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Miyawaki forests are tiny forests. They are relentlessly questioning the underlying principles.
they really are.
They're looking past the instructional manuals and asking why these biological mechanisms work and, whether the modern approach to building them is actually missing the point entirely.
The curiosity is just, it's relentless. And because they dive so deeply into both the biological and the, I guess, philosophical layers of this movement, we're actually splitting our analysis of their work into multiple parts.
Right. There's just so much to cover.
So much.
Yeah.
So this deep dive is focusing on the first half of Kesser and Steen's research. And before we really get into the mechanics of what these 2 11-year-olds have uncovered, make sure you subscribe to the channel because you really won't want to miss where their investigation leads in part 2.
You definitely won't. I think the best place to begin is with the biological baseline.
Yeah, let's start there.
To really grasp why Kesser and Steen are so captivated by the tiny forest movement, we have to look at the massive delta between standard green initiatives and the Miyawaki method. So this framework was developed by the Japanese botanist Akira Miyawaki. And his objective wasn't just to, plant a few trees. It was to artificially engineer a climax forest,
The climax forest, right.
which is the final, most stable stage of natural ecological succession. And he wanted to do this using exclusively native species in these severely concentrated areas.
And the parameters the sources outline for this are incredibly strict. Like you can apply this method anywhere in the world.
Right, Tokyo, Ohio, wherever.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to follow the formula. You start with a minimum of 25 different native species.
Which is a lot for a small space.
It is. But the defining metric, the rule that dictates literally everything else that happens in this ecosystem is the density.
Yeah, right.
You are required to plant 3 trees per square meter.
Which, I mean, that is a profound departure from how modern landscaping operates.
Oh, totally.
If you look at standard urban forestry or even commercial timber planting, trees are given significant square footage.
Right. They want to give them room to grow.
Exactly. The conventional wisdom is all about reducing competition, but the Miyawaki method actively forces it.
I was trying to visualize that density when I was going through the notes, and it's like if standard tree planting is laid out like a spacious, well-manicured golf course with plenty of breathing room,
Yeah.
the Miyawaki method is it's the absolute front row of a chaotic music festival.
That is a great way to put it.
It is shoulder to shoulder. The sources suggest mapping this out like a chessboard, where every single square meter gets 3 distinct plants.
Wow.
And you carve out just enough negative space for like a narrow service path and maybe a tiny clearing for a garden table to make plant cuttings.
Or a spot to sit with afternoon tea and scones.
Exactly, afternoon tea.
Yeah.
But the designated planting zones themselves are absolutely jammed.
They're packed. And that extreme density, that's the engine for the entire process.
How so?
Well, when Akira Miyawaki designed this, he was really solving for time. Natural forest succession is this painstakingly slow sequence. Like a barren patch of land might first be colonized by hardy weeds and grasses,
Yeah,
right?
get the pioneer stuff.
Exactly. And over decades, those create enough organic matter for small shrubs to take hold. Eventually, you get fast-growing pioneer trees, and only long after they die and enrich the soil do the really slow-growing dominant climax species.
Like ancient oaks or beeches.
Yeah, exactly. Only then do they finally establish themselves. But the Miyawaki method skips those transitional stages entirely.
That's crazy. So instead of waiting half a century for the soil and the shade conditions to evolve naturally, you're just fast-forwarding right to the main event.
You're creating a forced biological race.
A race.
Yeah, by planting 25 different climax and subcanopy species, 3 to a meter, you trigger this intense competition for sunlight.
Oh, because they're all crowded together.
Right. The saplings realize they literally cannot afford to expend energy branching outward. They have to shoot straight upward to survive. And simultaneously, because they are packed so tightly, their collective foliage forms a closed canopy incredibly quickly, often within just a year.
A year. That's insane.
It is, and that canopy completely shades the ground level, which locks in moisture and aggressively suppresses any competing invasive weeds.
Which totally explains the jaw-dropping growth rates they talk about in the sources.
Yeah.
I mean, the method essentially hacks the plant's survival instincts.
It really does.
The boys' research notes that because you're skipping those decades of slow succession and forcing this vertical race for the sun, you can see dramatic, highly visible forest development in just 6 months.
It delivers results on a timescale that modern humans can actually comprehend, you know? But that exact speed, that biological fast-forward button, is what introduces the major philosophical tension in Kesser and Steen's research.
Yeah, this is where the sociological element completely collides with the biology. Because the Miyawaki method yields such rapid results, provided you follow that 3 trees per meter mathematical formula, it spawned this massive commercial industry of convenience.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Kesser and Steen live a bit too far to just bike over to the Netherlands, but they pull up these online videos of how the Dutch are adopting this method, and they are completely shocked by what they see.
The videos really showcase the inevitable commodification of an ecological process.
Yes. The boys watch this footage of tiny forests literally arriving in moving vans.
It's just wild to picture.
Cardboard boxes filled with pre-grown saplings just being offloaded onto residential streets.
Wow.
And they analyze a video featuring a man we can just call the Tech Talk guy.
You're a talk guy, yeah.
He's standing in a yard explaining that to achieve this ultra-fast forest, you take a soil test, and then you just purchase the corresponding commercial soil amendment.
Right, just buy this solution.
Exactly. You mix in store-bought fertilizers, you unpack your box trees, and boom, instant forest.
And our 11-year-old guides draw a very firm line in the sand right here. They identify this approach as designer nature.
They completely reject it, like the flat-pack furniture approach to ecology.
Yeah, IKEA forests.
Exactly. Kesser and Steen argue that outsourcing the creation of the forest to, like, a commercial nursery and a chemical fertilizer plant, it totally defeats the underlying purpose.
Right.
They don't really begrudge the Tech Talk guy for making a living, but they view this garage assembly mindset as deeply hollow.
It misses the point for them.
It does. Their counterproposal is to grow the forest themselves, like propagating plants from seeds and taking cuttings from local existing forests.
Which takes a lot of patience.
It does. They actually casually note in their research, we're only 11, so taking an extra year or 2 to grow the plants ourselves is fine.
That is amazing. The luxury of youth allows them to prioritize the integrity of the process over the immediacy of the result. They're looking at the forest as a complex biological system to participate in, rather than, a green product to just be purchased and consumed.
I mean, I completely understand their purist stance, but looking at the sources, I have to play devil's advocate on behalf of the adults buying those cardboard boxes.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, Steen's own father is featured in the notes, and he provides a very grounded counter-argument.
Right.
He likes to spend an hour a week in the backyard, grilling meat over an open fire and playing caveman to unwind.
As one does.
Right. But he didn't, mine the ore, smelt the iron, and forge the barbecue grill himself.
Fair point.
He bought a manufactured tool to access that experience.
Accessibility is definitely the primary driver for the adults in this scenario.
And the skill barrier is real, like propagating native climax tree species from wild cuttings. That is not intuitive knowledge for most people.
No, not at all.
Plus, Steen's mother represents the average homeowner's baseline. She simply wants the yard to look tidy. So if ordering a pre-packaged forest in a moving van is the easiest way to replace a sterile, resource-draining monoculture lawn, isn't that a net positive? I mean, the sources clearly establish that the standard suburban lawn, maybe decorated with a single isolated apple tree, offers virtually zero ecological value.
Right, it's basically a bump in the road for ecology, and the tension here is really between scale and depth.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, the adults advocating for moving Van forests are correct that lowering the barrier to entry means more people will participate.
Which means more trees.
Theoretically, yes, which puts more trees in the ground. But Kesser and Steen are pointing out a critical flaw in that logic.
That's a flaw.
If you rely on commercial soil amendments and greenhouse-raised saplings, you're actually stripping the ecosystem of its resilience. You're creating a botanical zoo exhibit rather than a self-sustaining network.
Wow, a botanical zoo exhibit. That begs a massive logistical question, though.
What's that?
If Kesser and Steen are actively refusing to use store-bought fertilizers or designer soil mixes, how do they plan to sustain a forest packed with 3 competing trees per square meter?
It's a lot of mouths to feed.
That level of density requires immense nutritional support. So to solve this, the boys actually turn away from the internet and look to the older generation.
Right. They consult Oma,
Yes, Oma.
their grandmother, and she introduces them to the unseen architecture of the forest, the underworld.
She completely changes the trajectory of their research. She introduces the boys to the mechanics of underground fungal networks, and she pairs that with the principles of permaculture layering.
This is where the biological mechanisms truly shine. Oma is teaching them about mycorrhizal fungi.
Right.
When people look at a forest, they usually only see the above-ground competition. But beneath the soil, it's a highly sophisticated biological marketplace.
The marketplace.
Yeah. These fungi attach themselves to the roots of the trees and effectively act as microscopic extensions of the root system.
Because the fungi can reach places the tree roots physically can't.
Right, precisely. The fungal threads, or mycelium, they can infiltrate these microscopic crevices in the soil to mine for phosphorus, nitrogen, water.
Okay.
But fungi cannot photosynthesize, they can't make their own food from the sun.
Right, they need plants for that.
Exactly. So they trade the minerals and water they've mined to the trees, and in exchange, the trees pump liquid carbon, the sugars they produce through photosynthesis, down into the roots to feed the fungi.
That is incredible. It's literally an underground economic exchange.
There really is.
And Oma explains that this network connects the entire forest, allowing older, established trees to actually shunt nutrients to struggling saplings in the understory.
Just a support system.
Yeah. But to make that work in a tiny backyard space, Oma explains that they have to utilize permaculture layering.
Right.
Because if the fungal network is the plumbing, permaculture is the architecture.
I love that. It is the vertical expression of the Miyawaki density. Oma explains that to pack so many plants into a small area without them killing each other, you have to stratify them.
And the sources use a brilliant analogy for this. Oma tells the boys to build a biological apartment complex.
A biological apartment complex.
Yeah. You don't just plant an apple tree and leave the ground bare. The apple tree is like the penthouse occupant. It needs full, direct sunlight, and it sends a deep taproot far down into the earth.
Right.
But then on the middle floor, beneath the apple canopy, you plant a fruit bush, like blackcurrants.
Because blackcurrants evolved in the understory of larger forests, so they possess high shade tolerance.
Exactly.
They thrive in that dappled light that filters through the apple leaves.
And their roots occupy a completely different soil horizon. So they aren't fighting for the same exact nutrients.
Right.
Then, on the ground floor of this apartment complex, beneath the blackcurrants, you plant wild strawberries.
As a ground cover.
Yeah, they act as a living mulch, creeping along the surface. And they have very shallow, fibrous roots. Because these 3 plants utilize different light levels and pull water from entirely different depths of soil, they aren't directly competing.
They're stacking.
They're stacking.
And the efficiency of this stacking mechanism is just staggering.
Very huge.
The sources indicate that by combining the Miyawaki density rules with this permaculture layering, practitioners are successfully cultivating up to 200 trees and bushes within a mere 300 square meters.
That density turns the backyard into a carbon-capturing powerhouse. The biomass generated by 200 layered plants binds significantly more CO2 per square meter than, like, a naturally spaced woodland.
It does, and it dramatically increases local biodiversity, attracting native pollinators and bird species that totally ignore standard lawns.
Right.
However, we do need to carefully caveat the biodiversity claims presented in these sources.
Well, why is that?
Well, the metrics often used to promote tiny forest space. Their high biodiversity score heavily on the sheer quantity of species planted by the humans.
Oh, I see. So the numbers look incredible on paper simply because we artificially stuffed 25 species into a tiny grid.
Correct. It is a manufactured density. While it is incredibly effective at sequestering carbon and providing habitat for common urban wildlife, It does not magically replicate the deep, complex biodiversity of, say, a pristine, ancient woodland that supports rare or endangered species.
Right, it's not a silver bullet.
Exactly. It's an ecological tool, a highly engineered environment.
But the engineering of that environment brings us to the final revelation in Kesser and Steen's research, which I absolutely love.
The community aspect?
Yes. The boys discovered that the biological networking Oma described underground directly mirrors the social networking that occurs above ground when these forests are planted.
It's such a fascinating parallel.
It really is. The method doesn't just alter the chemistry of the soil, it alters the behavioral patterns of the human community surrounding it.
Because the sociability of the project is a direct byproduct of the physical labor required to build it.
The sources highlight really specific instances of this community bridging. There is this detailed account of a village coming together to plant a Miyawaki forest, where a 76-year-old grandfather finds himself kneeling in the soil, working side by side with his 4-year-old great-grandchild.
That's beautiful.
The communal effort of preparing the soil and executing that intricate planting grid, it literally forces generations to interact.
Furthermore, that accelerated growth cycle we analyzed earlier gives these forests a really unique institutional application.
Well, for schools.
Yeah, because the biological race for sunlight produces a visible, standing forest in just 6 months. Schools are actually utilizing them as living classrooms.
Which perfectly aligns with the academic calendar.
It does.
Like if students prepare the ground and plant the saplings in the fall, they aren't forced to wait decades to see the fruits of their labor. By the time they pack up their lockers for summer break, they can actually walk through a young forest they built themselves. The feedback loop is tight enough to hold a child's attention.
Exactly. It transforms environmentalism from this, abstract, anxiety-inducing global concept into a tangible local action.
Which makes Steen's reaction to this community aspect absolutely hilarious to me.
Oh, Steen.
I mean, despite being an 11-year-old boy, he channels the cynicism of a grumpy retiree.
He really does.
When the research touches on the idea of neighborhoods banding together to dig in the dirt, Steen dismisses it completely, stating, quote, "People are so spoiled and expect everything to be served to them."
Such an old soul.
Right. He looks at the Dutch moving vans dropping off designer nature and just assumes society is too lazy to do the actual work.
It is a sharp, if somewhat pessimistic critique of modern convenience culture.
Totally.
But his research partner, Kesser, provides the necessary philosophical counterbalance here.
Yes. Kesser looks past the laziness. He argues that the physical act of building the forest, which he brilliantly dubs garden gymnastics,
I love that.
is the exact medicine modern people need. It forces them out into the fresh air. And Kesser drops what might be the most insightful quote of the entire study.
The Tamagotchi quote.
Yes.
Yeah.
He says, building these forests will cure people of Tamagotchi fingers.
The imagery of Tamagotchi fingers perfectly encapsulates the modern condition.
It really does. I mean, he's describing a society endlessly tapping on screens, managing digital pets, or, scrolling through feeds, completely disconnected from physical reality.
Yeah.
Kesser realizes that the tiny forest isn't just about giving nature a biological head start. It's about giving humans a compelling physical reason to unplug their devices and reconnect their hands to the soil.
He synthesizes the dual purpose of the movement perfectly. The intense density heals the degraded local ecosystem, and the communal labor required to achieve it heals the fractured attention span of the neighborhood.
So let's pull all of these threads together. We began by looking at Akira Miyawaki's strict mathematical formula, forcing 25 native species into extreme density at 3 plants per square meter.
Right.
To totally hack the biological process of natural succession.
And then we examine the philosophical friction between the adult desire for instant, flat-pack designer nature delivered in a cardboard box versus Kesser and Steen's commitment to patient participatory ecology.
Then we took a journey underground with Oma to understand the unseen plumbing of mycorrhizal fungal networks and how permaculture layering creates a biological apartment complex to prevent root and light competition.
And finally, we saw how the forced density of the plants creates a forced density of human interaction, bridging generations and curing Tamagotchi fingers through hands-on garden gymnastics.
The depth of insight these two 11-year-olds have managed to extract from a backyard project is just staggering.
It's really impressive.
And remember, this is just the first part of our exploration into Kesser and Steen's data. They have so much more to uncover about the reality of maintaining these ecosystems.
They do.
So please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you're notified. the moment part 2 of this deep dive is released. You really won't want to miss how they apply these theories to the real world.
And as we conclude this initial analysis, I want to leave you with a concept to consider.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time today dissecting the biological fast-forward button.
Right.
By packing diverse native elements incredibly closely together and forcing them into a state of intense competition and simultaneous underground collaboration, nature is able to entirely skip its own slow, tedious developmental stages.
Yeah, skipping the decades of weeds and shrubs straight to the climax forest.
Exactly. It accelerates directly toward maturity. So my question for you to ponder is this. If radical force density and intricate collaboration can allow a biological forest to skip years of slow growth, what human systems, institutions, or communities might benefit from that exact same kind of radical density?